What kind of fuckery is this?
The ongoing expectations for being woke are expansive and damn near impossible to achieve. Trying to at least give off a semblance of wokeness these days involves a system of carefully choreographed social media postings, public appearances, and a series of statements made within earshot of at least 10 other verified woke folks to prove the validity of the proclamation. These days, cancel culture rules, and it seems folks just sit around waiting for one misstep and the opportunity to call out the perpetrator as a coon or some other descriptor denoting his or her failure to live up to literal black ass expectations. In the events leading up to the confirmation of Brett Kavanaugh to the U.S. Supreme Court, many black folks, black women in particular, spoke against Kavanaugh primarily due to sexual assault allegations mounted against him, and also because of the reasonable belief Kavanaugh would somehow interfere with Roe v. Wade and laws protecting the LGBTQ community, all of which directly affect black women because intersectionality. However, instead of understanding the way decisions made by the Supreme Court justices affect us all, a bunch of salty ass hoteps spent time on social media care policing sisters by going on about how this isn't our fight. White women don't care about us, and white feminism was never meant for us anyway. And listen, if anyone knows all these things to be true, it's black women. But our fussing, our resistance to this confirmation, and our speaking up had nothing to do with taking up white women's causes and doing all the legwork for them. It does, however, have everything to do with protecting ourselves against future attacks on our reproductive rights, our right to equal pay, and our right to equal protection under the law, even though the law was never intended to protect the likes of us anyway. Our protestations were about how the choices someone like Brett Kavanaugh makes can frame our realities and perhaps lead us to be required to choose between an unwanted pregnancy and a backroom termination, or how our efforts towards equality as women can be thwarted if someone like him teams up with other sexist justices to make decisions about our life options as women. But isn't that just the way, though? Folks stay out here trying to tell black women how to operate as such without any of the life experience required and without first considering we are brilliant and will have likely looked at a thing from every angle before anyone else has a chance to even consider approaching us. How about for once, y'all just trust we know what's best for us over any man, and defending our futures is never about caping for white women. I'm Malika Rogers, and that's This Week in Fuckery.
Ready?
Hey y'all, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Tackling Tomfoolery. This week we're going to do something a little bit different. Today we're going to be talking about clichéing while black. There are a lot of stereotypes and a lot of ways in which black people are pigeonholed. And most of that stems from, white supremacist ideology. But often we take that white supremacist ideology and we perpetuate it. And then we start to believe and parrot those stereotypes amongst ourselves. It ultimately is pretty damaging to us. So today, I have a few folks who are going to be sharing black cliches they can't stand and why. They're going to be talking about why those cliches bother them. And then I'm going to be touching on a few that disturb the shit out of me as well. So to get started, first I want to talk about the cliche that black women don't speak to each other. Let me just say that is a whole ass lie. Not only do black women speak to and acknowledge one another, but we're friends to each other. We build sisterly relationships with each other. We network with one another. We build businesses together. We build organizations together that help other women. We mentor together, we teach together, we volunteer together. I was walking into my building for work a couple of days ago, and I had on earbuds, as is usually the case. And a sister, walked up on the side of me and kind of waved that she wanted to talk to me. I took out my earbuds and she said, "Listen, I've been watching you for a little while. I was walking behind you, and I just wanted to let you know that I love those shoes." And I smiled and I said, "Oh, thank you." Then she starts, just making small talk with me. She introduced herself to me, told me what building she worked in, which is a building close to mine. I told her my name, showed her the building where I worked. She bid me a great day, and I did the same for her and kept it moving. And I want to make very clear that what happened between me and that sister wasn't out of the norm. I'm hard pressed to find a day when I don't have some sort of exchange or interaction with a Black woman I don't even know. And that doesn't even cover all the Black women I interact with regularly, who I do know, who I love, with whom I'm close. So when people say this, it's stupid. Naturally, women get to be whoever and however they are. So sometimes I might speak to a sister and maybe she doesn't speak back. And that might be for any number of reasons. But it's okay. And the idea we think that one or two or even 10 Black women not returning our niceties is an indication of how we should define all Black women is ridiculous. It's ridiculous. And I think ultimately it does stem from the way we're vilified, you know, the way we've been sort of implied to not really be human, to not be people, to not be kind, to not be loving, all the stereotypes about Black women being hard and harsh and mean and unusually strong and all of that other nonsense. All of that kind of lends to this idea we don't have any humanity. And we do. And we love each other and we like each other and we support each other. So, it's something that irritates me, and it's ultimately untrue. Some women are assholes. That's a given. But we get to be assholes. Black women get to be all of those things. We don't have to be unusually nice or unusually kind or go out of our way in some kind of odd manner to speak to each other to prove a point. It's okay for us to sometimes be having a bad day and not be able to carry a conversation. That's okay. But none of that should ever mean that those actions define the totality of Black women, because none of us are all one thing. And to apply that we are is stupid and ultimately just another example of racism. Just here in Sacramento alone, I belong to a group called Sacramento Sister Circle. It's a Facebook group, but it's more than that, because that group contains, I want to say, thousands of Black women in the greater Sacramento area and in also some areas outside of Sacramento. But there's community outreach, there are classes, there are group activities, there are ongoing conversations. I've seen so many women post about a need and seen hundreds of women respond and say, "How can we help?" Or, "I know someone who can help you. I know a place where you can go. The place where you can go is my place. Let me give you my number, my address. I'll inbox you." I see this on a daily. So for people to say, Black women don't speak to each other and black women don't look out for one another. It's just a bunch of bullshit. It's a whole ass lie. We absolutely do.
Hey, what's up, everybody? My name is Julian Long. I'm the host of I Just Be Saying Words, and I'm here on Tackling Tomfoolery today to talk about black cliches, specifically the black cliche of black people always talk back to the screen. So part of the thing that makes blackness and black language so colorful is that we've always had recurring tropes or themes, certain pieces of communication, beliefs that we repeat over and over again about ourselves. They're not necessarily true, but they feel true and they feel good to say. We find some humor in them, some joy in them. You know, simple stuff like, harmless stuff like light-skinned girls have big foreheads, or you can tell if a black woman got that extra part of arm fat, she can really cook. These are things that are not necessarily true, but they are true enough or feel true enough that we say them. One of the cliches that we have is about black people always talking back to the screen in the movies. Now, if you like me and you grew up in the 80s and 90s, stand-up comedy, especially black stand-up comics watching Def Comedy Jam, you heard that over and over again. Oh, you know how it is with black folk at the movie. Girl, don't go in there. Oh my gosh, she going in there. Girl, you better run. Turn around. Oh, she dead. She dead. Watch, she finna die. She dead. That's supposedly every black person or any black woman at the movies, at a horror movie, responding to what's going on the screen, talking to the screen as though the people in the screen could hear us and would react. That's been a trope for a long time. It's such a common trope that we say it, and honestly, I've never really heard anybody do it. It's something that is associated with blackness, I mean, to the point that it shows up in movies about us. Scary Movie, the parody horror film, that was the first thing they did, was show a black woman yelling at the screen. I can't remember, but I think the people on the screen even responded. It's become so commonplace that we accept it as truth. And the thing is, if it were true, it would make us some really obnoxious ass people. And that's not really who we are. I mean, think about it. When we go out to the movies, the most obnoxious thing that we're likely to do is bring our own food. And even that's another cliche, another trope. I mean, it happens to be true. Like, I rolled in with a two-piece to Black Panther, I'm not going to front. But that's beside the point. The point that I'm making is we've allowed that to become so associated with us that it's now got the pernicious and negative effect of backfiring. The assumption is that if there's a disruption at a movie theater, it's going to be the black people. But truthfully, fam, when is the last time you really heard black people talking at the screen in the movie? Not for nothing, but if we're being for real, that's some white people shit. White people talk during the movie. White people don't seem to give a damn that other people paid good money and had to arrange for a sitter and had to go through a lot of hoops and hurdles in order to be able to enjoy a movie that they paid way too much for, eating some popcorn that they paid way too much for, and they'll sit there and talk and stage whisper through the whole thing. I remember when I went to see Lincoln in the theaters, there was this couple behind us giggling and snickering, and I don't know what the fuck is funny about Abraham Lincoln, but they were giggling and snickering the whole time. Now, there was one black woman who had one comment that she repeated a few times, but that was just, because there were some powerful moments in Lincoln, and was kind of the appropriate response. But outside of that, that isn't really how we get down. We don't do a whole lot of yelling at the screen, and now that we've allowed this to become the narrative about us, when problems do pop off and an usher has to come in, they're almost certainly going to believe the white people over us. Not that they were necessarily bound to believe us anyway. I mean, white privilege is a hell of a drug. But we don't necessarily have to contribute to it by continuing to perpetuate this myth, this cliche. They're fun, some of them, but some of them it's really time to let go. And I think the whole black folk talk back to movies, we can let that one go safely and still be black as fuck. Anyway, that's just me talking about it. And I'll just be saying words.
DJ.
I see some enemies.
Hi, this is Desiree Napoleon. I'm an educator, parent out of Hartford, Connecticut, East Coast. And I guess the biggest, stereotype, if you will, one of the biggest ones I've fought against, especially professionally, has to do with this whole idea of Black folks and time, particularly the whole concept of colored people time and how we're, always late for things. For the longest time, I did equate lateness with a negativity. If you were late, you were unprofessional, you were lazy, you were, uncouth, so on and so forth. And it took me getting older and a little slower with certain things to understand that things happen exactly when they're supposed to, including arrivals and departures, and that we're all human. Sometimes you do get held up in traffic. Sometimes, sometimes there, is an accident or bad weather, things that we cannot control that make us late. And it can't be attributed to just a particular race of person. And it's not, the end of the world if you are late. Also, if you consider it from a more philosophical standpoint, I guess, we are all arriving, we are all coming and going exactly when we are supposed to arrive and depart. So I guess, again, being older, slower, and having had more time to think about these things over the course of my life is, the reason that I don't necessarily look at colored people time as being, the worst thing in the world. And I think that's about all I have.
DJ.
I see some enemies.
So I would say the cliche Black people parrot and perpetuate that probably bothers me the absolute most is we the only race of people who don't stick together. Look at Asians and look at Mexicans and white folks. They build together. They'll live 50 billion people to one house just so somebody can start a business or buy a home. We don't do that. Ugh. I really, really, really want us to stop saying this shit. 'Cause it's a lie. And it's so destructive. And what we say about ourselves matters far more than what anybody else says about us. It's one thing for someone to say something dirty about you, but it takes it to another level for you to believe that shit and let someone else have the privilege to define you. This ideology, it just perpetuates an untrue stereotype about us. We have definitely lived umpteen people to a cabin when we were slaves. We wrote the book on togetherness, right? We know how to coexist in a house. There are countless Black people who grew up poor in small homes with lots of siblings and maybe extended family all under the same roof. And they functioned and they survived and they worked together. This is not new to us. However, the idea we believe this is how we have to live in order for us to accomplish anything like starting a business or purchasing a home or, saving a large amount of money just to build a nest egg or to go towards retirement. The fact we think this is a requirement or this is the only way or because we saw someone else do it and we aren't doing it, we are somehow deficient and lacking as people is bullshit. It's bullshit. And really, if someone is all about the furtherance of Black folks and the success of Black folks and the, strides towards autonomy, financial autonomy in particular of Black folks, then people who want that and people who claim to be about that have to stop comparing themselves to other races and ethnicities, especially to white folks. Stop making what you think white people do be the standard for how you want to live your life or how you think all Black folks ought to function. We're us. We don't have to live according to someone else's standards. We don't have to accomplish our goals based on being afraid of a stereotype or based on thinking what someone else does is the ultimate example of how to do and how to be. So the fact we even say this about ourselves in the first place just shows how far-reaching and how pervasive, white supremacist ideology really is. How this racial oppression over hundreds of years has affected us and convinced us somehow that we as people in general are somehow subpar because we aren't doing what someone else is doing. Black people buy homes every day. Most of the Black people I know are homeowners, age notwithstanding. Lots of Black people I know are business owners. And they didn't have to live 30 to a home to accomplish that goal. They didn't have to use some other race or ethnicity as the model for how to accomplish their goals, for how to live their lives. They chose their own path, and it worked out well. And we do that regularly, and we're okay. I don't know why we're always so eager to model our actions after white folks and anyone else who doesn't look like us. I mean, well, again, it just goes to show how far-reaching, white supremacy is, because it has us convinced that we aren't enough to accomplish our goals on our own, that we can't conceptualize and plan a future for ourselves that involves our success without viewing it through a lens of whiteness. And it's sad that's what we think. But if we really stop to take a look around us, like I said, we build every day. We create every day. We invent every day. We improve existing processes and businesses and ideologies every day. We are far more brilliant and successful than we give ourselves credit for being. And with stereotypes like this one, it makes it difficult for us to stop and appreciate our successes because we're so mired down in the idea that whatever we're doing isn't good enough. Or this isn't what, let's look at see what the Jews are doing. Let's see what the Asians are doing. Let's see what so-and-so's doing. And it's fine to look and receive inspiration from other people. But when it comes to deciding who we are and what we want to do and how we're going to accomplish our goals, we don't always have to look outside ourselves. And honestly, we never have to look outside ourselves because success exists right within our communities. Progress exists right within our communities. Innovation exists right within our communities. And so we just need to stop perpetuating this bullshit and take some time to look at ourselves and look at our family members, look at our friends, look at people in our communities and see their successes and understand we too can have those successes and we don't always have to put ourselves down to accomplish that, and we don't have to compare ourselves to someone else who's had an entirely different set of life circumstances and privileges that we've never had and never will have. We can't compare ourselves to that, and we shouldn't compare ourselves to that. Let's compete against ourselves for a change.
So the cliche that I am particularly tired of is Black people don't swim, or we don't do water, or anything related to water. And it's absolutely not true. I enjoy swimming. I don't enjoy the chore of having to do my hair when it's over. Like, I don't think I don't think people understand that. Like me in particular, I enjoy water, I enjoy water sports, but I don't enjoy the chore that comes along with having to condition and shampoo and blow dry. Just, the task of being a Black woman with hair. I just don't enjoy that. I don't think people get, and this is Black people too, Black people or white people who push that particular cliche. I don't think that they understand that not only is it incorrect, but it's also a little damaging. Like, Black folks, our antipathy towards swimming pools in the first place is rooted in segregation and racism. I mean, it was not so long ago that public beaches and pools in the U.S. displayed white-only signs, and Black people who entered the beaches were chased off or beaten, and pools were drained if a Black person got in them. So, of course, there's a long history of aversion to water sports, but it's 2018 for Pete's sake. I mean, if you're still walking around tossing out phrases like "that's white people shit," then the problem is really with you. Say it, make it a personal statement. I don't swim. I don't ski. I don't do water sports. Don't make it seem like this is a whole race of people who just don't do that. I remember when I was a kid and I went swimming over a girlfriend's house, and we were like 9 years old. And I remember hearing her mom say, "Oh, I had no idea Kelly knew how to swim. I just assumed that, since, and gave kind of like, since she was trying to say since she's Black without actually having to come out and say, well, since she's Black, I didn't think she would know how to swim." I just remember my mom making us leave. She was like, we're leaving. And next thing I know, I'm out at the pool and my mom's telling me to get dressed, and we're getting in the car. And on the car ride home, my mom was like, "This is why I want you to continue to do things that are outside of what's typical for Black people." And I didn't really understand what she meant. And she really went into this exhaustive conversation about what Tina's mom had alleged and how it made her feel, and why she was glad that I was in ballet and glad that, I was in gymnastics, and she put me in swimming and skiing and ice skating and just all the things that I wouldn't normally be involved in because I'm a Black child. My mother went out of her way to make sure that I was involved in, because she didn't want me to be looked at like that. But cliches in general are just tiresome. But this one in particular, it bothers me because it's untrue and it's ridiculous. we can do anything. We can swim, we can ski, we can go skydiving and hiking, and we can. The only barriers or obstacles that we put up as far as activities are concerned are the ones that we put in front of ourselves. Like, we have a Black Olympic champion who's a swimmer. So the idea that people still say Black people don't swim is absolutely ridiculous to me. It really, really is.
DJ.
I see some enemy. Some enemy.
Hi there, this is A.M. Lewis, and I wanted to share my thoughts on something that Black folks think are true about themselves, but I disagree. And my thing is the saying, crabs in a barrel or a bucket. Most of you probably know that this term is generally used when a Black person who is trying to achieve something or has achieved something falls under scrutiny by another Black person or other Black people. This is why we can't rise as a people, always with the crabs in the barrel. And people say this, Black folks say this as though we're the only ones who have negative things to say about each other. I don't know about certain other cultures because I'm not of those cultures, but I do know that white people do this all the time. It is not just us. As soon as somebody gets hot in the public eye, particularly in entertainment performers, there's always a backlash. I don't see white folks talking about no damn crabs in a barrel. It's just a thing. And what bothers me about it is it's typically used in our community whenever someone is being any kind of critical, even constructive criticism is met with that, kind of a throwing up of the hands and crabs in a barrel. And Malika and I had talked about this, and she brought up something that I'd never considered and I wanted to share, which is no one ever talks about the fact that crabs don't belong in barrels in the first place. Barrels and buckets aren't crabs' natural habitat. Crabs live in the ocean and around the ocean on beaches. They're in a barrel or they're in a bucket because they've been captured, are about to be sold for people like me to eat with drawn butter or for someone to eat themselves. When I was a little girl, we used to live in a coastal town in California, and my parents used to go crabbing in the rocky areas of the beach. We would stick something. I was really small. I can't remember 100% clearly, but I think it was like a hanger, a stretched out hanger, and a crab would catch onto it. We pull it up and literally throw it in the bucket, then go home and eat them. So crabs are in buckets because they've been captured. That also makes it kind of a funky analogy to use about ourselves when you take into consideration the history of chattel slavery, the continuing institutionalized racism that can and does have us somewhat captured, somewhat stuck. Crabs in a barrel is just, it is not, first of all, it's not a term that I think we should be using toward each other. And second of all, it's even deeper than what we realize we're saying. That little perspective shift, why are the crabs in a barrel anyway, was eye-opening for me. It's not something I say anyway, but I would encourage people to not say it, period, because it doesn't make sense. And also, well, not that it doesn't make sense, it's just silly. It's silly that we cannot accept at times constructive criticism, or criticism, period, when necessary. Everything we do isn't right. Everything we do isn't cool or good. It's okay to call that out. It is, appropriately. So, crabs in a barrel, don't say it. Stop saying it, or at least give it some thought. That's my 2 cents.
DJ.
I see some enemy. Some enemy.
So the last black cliche I want to talk about is black don't crack. For most of my life, I totally valued the idea of melanin keeping black folks from looking like 5-day-old bananas or weathered wallets or whatever as we get older. But just like lots of other folks, I would run around saying black don't crack, and I would feel like smug about it. But then I got older, I matured some, and when I became a little more knowledgeable about how it's not just about the way we look on the outside, but what's happening to us on the inside. And when I realized the way, our mental and internal health is affected by, racism, sexism, oppression, etc., I started to think about the ways in which we crack, for sure, but it's usually from the inside. Outside, melanin keeps us looking great. So on the outside, I'm 44 looking 35, right? But on the inside, I'm 62 because I'm dealing with the stress, the anxiety, the tension, the constant walking on eggshells, the constant fight to be comfortable and be bold about my identity, but the ramifications in dealing with being that way. So all those things we face, and generally we internalize them, and as a result, we start to crack. It's just not the crack that anybody can see. So I started thinking about hypertension, heart disease, stress-related illnesses, our failure to or reluctance in pursuing mental health care management, because of stereotypes, another stereotype and cliche of black people not seeing shrinks or seeing therapists being some kind of white people shit, which it absolutely is not. It's for humans, period. And if anybody could stand to get ongoing mental health maintenance, it's black folks, especially black women. The level of fuckery we deal with in our lives that has nothing to do with anything we've caused or created, but everything to do with the racist oppression that plagues us, that makes us candidates, that makes us really in need of constant mental checking, of a place to unload, to unwind, to express ourselves in a place without judgment. So, and sometimes as a result of us thinking that black doesn't crack, we switch our focus to our outer appearance. Maybe we do work out and our hair is done, our nails are done, our makeup is perfect. But the inside is just torn up. We're torn up emotionally. We're torn up spiritually. We're working out, but our blood pressure's high. We're working out, but for some reason we're at risk for diabetes. We're working out, but our stress level is stupid, because of all the things that we have to encounter and deal with on a daily basis, simply based on us being black. I want to say it was 2013, November of 2013, The Root published an article, and it was Black May Not Crack, but We're Aging Faster Inside. And we'll put a link to that in the show notes. But this article just talks about what I've been mentioning in terms of how on the outside our melanin is preserving our skin, our appearance. We look great for our ages, whatever that age might be. But on the inside, all the different facets of our lives are taking a toll on it, heart disease and high blood pressure and increased risk of stroke and diabetes, etc. All of those things, obesity. So we're aging quickly on the inside, excuse me, but aging slowly on the outside. And what ultimately we want is for the inside and the outside to age at the same time, and preferably at a slow pace, right? But we have to take care of ourselves for that. So I'm not saying that we should stop saying black don't crack, because I get it. I mean, we do tend to look damn good, regardless of how old we are. But I think when we say it, we can't be cavalier about it, and we can't get into the thinking that this outer appearance and the benefits of our melanin mean that we don't have to be vigilant about taking care of our mental health and our physical health. That we don't have to eat properly, that we don't have to exercise regularly, and so on. We have to do all of those things regardless, so that our black doesn't really crack. So that when we say it, we mean that inside and outside, we're taking care of ourselves. So black don't crack is true to a certain extent when it comes to the way we might look on the outside. But it's definitely past time for us to be far more concerned about what's happening to our bodies internally and what's happening to our mental health and how we are caring for ourselves. And we need to put that ahead of just being about the way we look on the outside. So anyway, thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Tackling Tomfoolery. I like to thank those who gave their input today: Kelly Ceballos, A.M. Lewis, Julian Long, and also Desiree Napoleon. I thank you all for participating and for giving your insight. Clichéing while black. It's been a blast. Thanks for listening.
Ready?
Tackling Tomfoolery is produced by Bren Inman for Square People Media. For more information or for comments and conversation, find us on the web at tacklingtomfoolery.org, the Tackling Tomfoolery podcast on Facebook, Tackling Tomfoolery on Twitter, and Tackling Tomfool on Instagram. To subscribe to the podcast, go to Stitcher, Apple Podcast, or SoundCloud, and please make sure you review the show because it helps others find us. If you'd like to contact us, email us at tacklingtomfoolery@gmail.com or leave us a voicemail at 916-573-1065 and let us know what tomfoolery you're tackling. You can also donate to the podcast via Patreon at patreon.com/tacklingtomfoolery. Let's get it.